Just as the sun begins to peek over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the thatched roofs, our story begins in a small African village nestled in the eastern part of Nigeria. This village, a vibrant tableau of rustic charm, is home to a close-knit community who live their lives with a simplicity that is both humbling and beautiful. The inhabitants rise with the dawn, their days filled with hard work in the fields and laughter in the communal areas. Among the mud brick houses and bustling marketplaces, the villagers lead lives marked by cleanliness and order. However, in this harmonious setting, there is one character who is noticeably different. Ukamaka, a giantess, is an anomaly in this otherwise orderly realm. Her size is not the only thing that sets her apart. Her disregard for cleanliness is as conspicuous as her towering presence. Amidst these hard-working and clean villagers, there was one who stood out like a sore thumb. This is the story of Ukamaka, the village's giantess. Ukamaka wasn't just known for her towering height and round figure, she had a peculiar habit that made her the talk of the village. Now let's paint a picture of Ukamaka. Picture a giant, not just any giant, but one whose carefree attitude towards cleanliness was legendary. Ukamaka, a rotund woman of extraordinary size, had an unusual affinity for filth. She seemed to revel in her uncleanliness, almost as if it was a badge of honor she wore proudly. Despite her size, it wasn't her girth that made her stand out. No, it was her disregard for hygiene that earned her the dubious distinction in her village. Her living quarters were a testament to her dirty habits. A hodgepodge of discarded food items, torn clothes, and other unmentionable debris formed a chaotic landscape around her. It was a sight that could make even the bravest lose their lunch. The villagers, in their concern and frustration, would plead with her to maintain a semblance of cleanliness, to no avail. Ukamaka would simply shrug off their pleas, her laughter echoing through the village, a clear indication of her indifference to their concerns. But it was her smell. Oh, that smell. That was the final straw. It was a stench so powerful and pungent that it could be detected from 500 meters away. It was a smell that hung in the air, a constant reminder of Ukamaka's dirty habits. It was a smell that got under your skin, a smell you could almost taste. This wasn't just a case of a woman who enjoyed wallowing in filth. This was a woman who seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from her dirty habits, who seemed to thrive in the chaos and filth she created around her. Ukamaka, with her dirty habits and unbearable stench, became a constant thorn in the village's side. She was a living, breathing testament to the adage that cleanliness is indeed next to godliness. And for the villagers, she was a constant reminder of the importance of maintaining cleanliness, even if it was a lesson they had to learn the hard way. On many occasions, the villagers tried to reason with Ukamaka, hoping she would adopt a cleaner lifestyle. They tirelessly approached her, their hearts heavy with concern and their words dripping with desperation. Their voices echoed through the village, a chorus of pleas and appeals, each one falling into the abyss of Ukamaka's indifference. The village's elder, a man renowned for his wisdom and patience, was the first to step forward. He urged Ukamaka in his gentle, soothing voice to consider the beauty of cleanliness, the harmony it could bring to her life and the village at large. But Ukamaka merely shrugged, her eyes vacant, her mind elsewhere. Then came the village's women, the guardians of cleanliness and order. They pleaded with Ukamaka, their voices carrying the strain of worry. They spoke of the health dangers of her habits, the risk to the children who played nearby, and the discomfort her odor caused. But Ukamaka merely laughed, her laughter ringing hollow among the concerned faces. The village's children too approached Ukamaka. With innocence in their eyes and hope in their hearts, they asked her to play with them, to join their world of laughter and joy. But their pleas too fell on deaf ears. Ukamaka dismissed them with a wave of her hand, her attention returning to her world of dirt and grime. Finally, the village's men tried to reason with her. They spoke of respect, of dignity, of the pride one finds in cleanliness. Their voices were firm, their words strong, but to Ukamaka, they were nothing more than whispers in the wind. Despite their pleas, Ukamaka remained unmoved, continuing to live in her filth. She wore her dirt like a badge of honor, her stench a cloak of defiance. To the villagers' despair, Ukamaka's world remained unchanged, her habits unbroken, her indifference unshaken. And so their pleas echoed unanswered, their hopes fading into the silent despair of a village left to bear the burden of Ukamaka's filth. One day, the village reached its breaking point. Ukamaka's stench had become unbearable. It was as if the very air had turned sour, the once vibrant colors of the village fading under the oppressive weight of her filth. The village, a place once brimming with life, had now become a ghost town, with people preferring to stay indoors rather than venture out into the tainted air. The villagers had tried everything. They had pleaded with her, offered her help, and even tried to clean up after her. But no matter what they did, the filth just kept piling up, and the stench only grew stronger. It was as if Ukamaka was a magnet for dirt, attracting it from every corner of the village and beyond. The children stopped playing in the streets, their laughter replaced by the constant hum of flies drawn to the filth. The market, once the heart of the village, was now deserted, the traders having moved their stands as far from Ukamaka's hut as possible. Even the animals seemed to avoid her, their instincts warning them of the danger her filth posed. And then came the day when the village well, the life-giving source of the community, got contaminated. The water, once clear and refreshing, had turned murky and foul-smelling. The villagers couldn't drink it, couldn't use it to cook, couldn't even use it to wash. It was the last straw. The village elders called for a meeting. They sat under the ancient Iroko tree, their faces etched with worry and frustration. Their discussion was heated, their voices echoing through the silent village. They argued, they deliberated, and they finally came to a decision. The villagers decided they had had enough. It was time for Ukamaka to leave. Their hearts were heavy with sadness, but they knew it was the only way. They couldn't let one person's habits ruin the entire village. It was time for a change. It was time for Ukamaka to go. With heavy hearts but resolute minds, the villagers gathered to deliver their final verdict to Ukamaka. The sun was setting on the horizon, casting long shadows and painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the usual cheerful evenings in the village. The villagers, young and old, men and women, had all gathered at the village square, their faces etched with a mix of relief and sadness. In the heart of the crowd stood Ukamaka, the giantess. She towered over the villagers, her figure casting an imposing shadow on the dusty ground. Her clothes were as unkempt as ever, her hair a tangled mess, and the stench that usually followed her was more potent than ever. It was a physical representation of the problem that had plagued the village for so long. The village elder, his face lined with age and wisdom, stepped forward. He cleared his throat, his voice echoing across the silent square. "Ukamaka," he began, his voice steady, "you have been a part of our community for years. We have pleaded with you, advised you, and even tried to help you. But your refusal to maintain cleanliness has not only affected you, but also the entire village." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd, their faces reflecting the truth of his words. The elder continued, "Therefore, it is with a heavy heart that we must ask you to leave. You are banished from this village." The declaration hung in the air, a harsh reality that seemed to echo off the mud huts and the surrounding trees. The crowd held its collective breath, their gazes shifting to Ukamaka. The giantess stood still, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of disbelief. She looked around at the familiar faces, the people she had grown up with, and saw nothing but determination and resolve. As the reality of the situation sunk in, Ukamaka's eyes welled up with tears. She had never imagined that her habits would lead to this. She had always considered her dirtiness a part of her identity, never realizing the discomfort it caused others. Now, the consequence of her actions was more than clear. The villagers watched as Ukamaka turned, her steps heavy and her shoulders slumped. She walked away from the village square, away from the only home she had ever known. The villagers watched her retreating figure, their hearts heavy with regret but also relief. They had lost one of their own today, but they also knew it was for the greater good. And so, Ukamaka, the giantess who refused to embrace cleanliness, was banished from the village she once called home.